Good afternoon. I'm Bill Anderson. I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol. Our producer Dave in France is complaining it's too hot. it's, when we live in the UK, we're going, oh, I wish I could have a bit of sunshine. And when we move to these countries that are generally a lot warmer, we get the complaints it's too hot. I am delighted to be joined again by a regular contributor, Marcel Salazar. Welcome, Marcel.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here again.
Are you complaining about the heat too, Marcel?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the humidity, the heat I can live with. It's the humidity that is uncomfortable and actually part of the reason we're going to talk about today because
Ah.
humidity is the thing I struggle with.
Yeah, and we have this new rule in Spain for people who don't know that if you have air conditioning, you can't turn it any lower than 27 degrees. uh, which actually doesn't do very much for it. But you go into some places now and they've got their air conditioning at 27 degrees to save electricity and two big fans going to cool the air.
Big time. I don't understand where the measurement, to be honest, for the 27 degrees comes from because normal room temperature is 22 degrees, which is
Yeah,
comfortable. 27, therefore, is going to be pretty warm, to be honest. So I
yeah.
think they basically want everyone to sort of marinate in a degree of sweat in an environment where everyone's at 27 degrees. But I personally, I don't quite know where it comes from. But
But
I understand from an environmental standpoint for sure it makes sense to not have the AC units pumping out as getting it as cold as possible when
yeah,
possible.
but
But you know,
but but
it's
but
a
if
tricky adjustment for sure.
if you set it at 27 degrees and then you've got to run two fans to cool the air down, you're actually using
That's
probably
right.
more electricity than
That's
just
right. Yeah,
even
exactly.
turning it to
You're just going to find
25.
other things. Yeah.
Yeah. Marcel, but before we get on to our topic today, I want to ask you a general question. Um,
Yep.
I I meet people all the time. Really, in my role as a counsellor, whenever we go down to the village or go to other parts of Mikas, people always stop me and have a chat. And I usually make the mistake of saying, "How are you?" because they tell me.
Yeah.
I keep passing your number on to people and your website on to people
Excellent.
because a lot of people are complaining about aches and pains and things that are not working properly and whatever. Do you think, Marcel, that generally people leave it too late to come to someone like you? That they put up with it for too long?
Yes.
That's a very
So, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head perfectly there. What the general consensus is, and I'm probably guilty even of this myself, is that we wait and wait and wait until we can't wait any longer, until we literally can't bear whatever it is, pain, limited movement, etc.
right.
And then we come desperately to come and see somebody. Yes, you referred our mutual friend who did come and see me yesterday. It was as long as he could endure it.
Yeah.
And then we got almost an immediate reaction to the positive, which was absolutely fantastic. But it's very, very common that we wait until, because there are some occasions where it goes away by itself.
Yeah,
There
sure.
are a few occasions where you give it a bit of time, your body does whatever it has to, relaxes perhaps, or you stretch it out and it goes away, etc. But I would generally say, as a rule of thumb, if you've had something consistent in 3 days, you need to start considering getting it looked at. If it comes up to the fifth day,
Yeah.
make the appointment.
Yeah, and of course we are talking here about musculoskeletal type problems, aren't we? We're
Correct.
not talking about if someone's got a bad indigestion or whatever. We are talking
No,
about things that can be treated by physical therapy. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. No, we're talking about things that you pain. You've got a lot of pain in a particular muscle. You've got, which is the thing that I see a lot. At the moment, I'm dealing with a lot of neck and shoulder issues,
right.
and the therapy works really well so far. So it's something that does work.
Mm,
But you have, and funnily enough, a lot of the clients that I've been seeing recently haven't been to practitioners before,
right.
or they have. Excuse me. And I have a client at the moment from London who said, "Can I put you in my bag and send you?" and I want you to be my therapist in London. And I love hearing things like that. Excuse me. So that's awesome because, you know, sometimes different things work differently. And so even if you go to a practitioner for one given problem, do consider others. Don't just knock one on the head and say, right, okay, well, I've been to a chiropractor and it didn't work, so I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
Your best bet is always try and go to either a different chiropractor or a different medical professional who's just give that a go, because obviously, whilst I'm not suggesting that you throw money away, you need to try and find the solution to what is a problem for you, and which could become a long-term problem as well. So it's good because the chances are there's somebody out there that can help you.
And in your clinic, Marcel, since you moved to your new premises, you've been sort of extending the range of services that you have.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's quite important because if I've got a pain somewhere, you know, I know very little about this whole world, and I don't necessarily know whether I need a physio or a chiropractor or an osteopath or a whatever.
Absolutely.
And it may well be that I go, oh yeah, well I got pain in my back, I better go to a chiropractor. And maybe actually it's not chiropraxy that I need. Maybe, you know, and I think that the fact that you have a range of professionals working within your clinic, because you might well say, well, look, this is not something that I can help you with, but my colleague can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that the point of the service is because if I can offer a complete holistic solution,
Right.
then I've got all my bases covered, you see. So I will have practitioners working with will do things that I don't do, or they will do things that will be a continuation of what I do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that works really well. Sometimes there may be clients who come to see them, and then they feel like what I do would complement what they're doing already.
Right. Right.
And that's this kind of cycle of service that I really wanted to create right from the beginning. And now having these premises allows me to do that, which means that, you know, I know, for example, that acupuncture can work amazingly well for some people. And of course, just like any therapy, it doesn't work amazingly for everybody, but it can work really, really well for some people. And acupuncture is not a service that I provide. So I have an acupuncturist who is a very qualified traditional Chinese medicine therapist who is able to really fine-tune whatever they need in that capacity of acupuncture. I have the same now in relation to postural assessment and work, as well as a Pilates specialist.
Right.
And then, of course, we do strength training and personal training as well, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So that's always necessary.
But this kind of gets round the idea of what you were saying, Marcel, that sometimes people say, oh, you know, I went to a chiropractor and it didn't work. Well, maybe it wasn't a chiropractor they needed.
Exactly.
But once a person walks through that chiropractor's door, they're not going to very easily just go, oh, well, it's not me you need to see. You need to go and see Marcel instead because...
There you go. That's right. They're not going to be too keen on doing that, right?
No,
but if it's all under one roof, then it's here and available, and you can obviously person that either I, as the health professional, think is most suitable, or you can make the yourself. So, you know, that's exactly why, and thank you for mentioning, but that's exactly why we've increased the range available, because it just gives more to the client to make sure that when they walk out the door, they feel like they're getting a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
Or perhaps even getting a solution to a problem that they didn't think could be changed. And we've experienced that already, which has been fantastic. Again, we've had a client who was having a huge problems with walking, a lot of pain, literally, shall I say, malformation in the feet. And now we're able to actually work and change that structure. She's now experiencing no pain, walking freely, and feeling like, you know, her life is completely different. And it's such a wonderful ability to be able to help people change something they never thought they could, basically. So that's really exciting. We've got a lot more to do.
Yeah. Okay, Marcel, Dave just said, did you buy a pair of rollerblades?
Nice,
That's
smart.
yeah.
That's a good lateral thinking there. I like that. I like that a lot. But
Yeah.
no,
And
no.
it could well result in some return customers as well, couldn't it?
That would work. Yes, exactly. Going over
Yeah.
regularly and tripping is good for business. No,
Yeah.
that's not the business I generally see. But
No.
yeah, no, no, she's walking on her own 2 feet, and that was exactly the goal. She may feel like going rollerblading now, whereas she might not have been before,
Yeah.
but now she actually can walk comfortably on her own feet, which is exactly the goal here. So yeah, definitely improving that.
Okay, Marcel, I kind of distracted you at the beginning there because
That's
there were
fine.
just things that were going through my head, and I thought might be useful just to have that little conversation.
No, I love it.
But you're going to talk to us today about cramps.
Cramps.
Yeah, so
Cramp. Now, cramp might not be the most exciting. I can already see Dave going, cramp? What? What's this? Who's this for? I know. But believe me, it's much more common than you think. And obviously, a show of hands if you've ever had a cramp. Let's be honest. Sit down, Dave. Sit down. Put it away. Okay. So if you've ever had a cramp, then you know what it feels like. Okay.
yeah, it's
So
very
I'm going to
unpleasant.
describe it for you, okay? So I'm going to describe what muscle cramp, basically like a ball tightening up in a muscle. And the most common place for this to happen is your calf muscle.
Yeah,
So a lot of people have, for example, particularly older clients will have had cramp in their calf muscle at night.
right.
And that's a very uncomfortable experience because it's so uncomfortable that it can actually wake you up.
Mm,
Which is, if you've ever had that, or if you're listening to this and you're thinking, my God, I've definitely had that, then that's a horrible thing to have. There are things that you can do to alleviate it.
right.
But what I want to first talk about how you get it. And this is something that you, if you know about it, you can help to avoid getting it in the first place. Because a lot of
Okay.
people, once they get it, go, well, this is just something that I'm going to have to live with, which generally speaking, 8 times out does resolve itself. And I'm not suggesting that every time, or if you get a cramp, you have to be somebody like me, but it would help, particularly if you're getting cramp regularly.
Right.
But cramp tends to be more random. But to avoid cramp, there's a few things you need to know about the causes of it.
Right.
Okay. So the causes of it can be very straightforward. So the causes are the most common and particularly relevant for right now is dehydration.
Okay.
So dehydration will play a big part in muscle cramping in any part of your body. It could be your upper back, it could be your arms, it could be your legs. It's most likely going to be in your legs because those are the big muscles and you use them a lot when you're walking. And the cause of that is usually because you're losing your electrolytes through sweat.
Okay.
Now, if anyone's not familiar with electrolytes, those are the simple bodies inside your body that allow processes to occur appropriately, or the metabolism to be maintained, which is the official word, which is the correct processing of body. If you empty out and leak your electrolytes, which facilitate contraction, for example, then your muscles are going to start to grind to a halt. Leaking oil from an engine, right? If you imagine that, you're leaking oil, what's going to happen? The engine is going to start to grind down and eventually come to a stop. Now, our bodies, we can replace them very, very quickly. But quick show of hands out of you two fellas, how do you replace your electrolytes? And show me your hands.
Yeah, it's not with an extra glass of wine, is it?
It's not. No, you do get other benefits from wine. I'll give you that. You do get other benefits from wine, but wine isn't going to be one. And wine is a problem because it's a diuretic.
Yeah, and it increases the
Easy
rate.
diuretic.
Yeah.
So that was another cause for potentially getting cramp, which I was going to come to, but you beat me to it. Thanks.
Okay.
For that one, Bill. Wine is not useful in the capacity of replenishing electrolytes, but what you're looking for is effectively sodium.
Yeah.
Sodium and a little bit of sugar. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the remedy for if you're particularly unwell or if you vomit, for example. It's very important to replace your electrolytes very, very quickly because you literally expel those. So you need to replace your electrolytes and your gut biome. And that's simply with sodium, which can be salt, small amount of salt, and a little bit of glucose, so some form of sugar of some description. So for example, a cup of tea, a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt is a brilliant way when it's cold, not when it's hot, when it's cold, to replace your electrolytes really, really quickly. So in cooler temperatures, a cup of tea with those two things is brilliant for either cramping and or if you've been sweating a lot, or if you have vomited or have loose bowel. But in the summertime, you can obviously make your own drinks up. There are plenty of sports drinks that say they contain electrolyte replacement in it, which they also contain way too much sugar, so you wouldn't want too much of that. But if you've been out for a long walk, or you've sweat a lot from being physical, or even just sitting in a chair because you sweat sitting in a chair in this place,
Indeed,
then you can replace that by lights as well, either a homemade brew or via a sports drink of some description. And that's a very simple solution. Or if you're playing sport, consuming those electrolytes before and during the sports is going to help to avoid cramping as well. And that's something I'm conscious of when I play paddle, particularly at this time of year.
yeah, and it's very clear. I mean, on the salts issue, I mean, you just have to lick your sweaty skin, and you taste the salt
Yep,
oozing out of your
that's
body.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's not the way I would suggest you replace your electrolytes. You
No,
don't have to be like a cat just licking your own
licking
arms,
yourself.
because that's something that I would imagine Dave is all up for. But otherwise, most people probably not. Here we go. He's coming on now. So we're just not. I can't resist this one.
Not
So,
my
yeah,
arms. It'll be somebody else. It'll be a young lady that's sweating to death that I'll be licking.
there we go. You come up with a good idea.
Yeah. Oh,
Alternatively, if it's somebody else you want to lick the arms, optional. Not recommended, but that's optional. Okay, that's not
Yeah, I think I'll kind of give that a miss, actually.
right.
Yeah, you could set up a Facebook group with this, couldn't we?
Sort of
Omni lickers or something.
sweat lickers.
Omni lickers, love it. I love it. Okay, good. Yeah, electrolyte replacers, something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Imagine the membership for that. How many people are going to join for that?
Massive.
Huge.
Get for that,
Put me
for sure.
Put
But
me
you're
in
right.
Put me in straight away.
You're absolutely right, Bill. You can literally taste it when you are, when you're sweating a lot, that you have salt. That's why dogs, for example, dogs, they'll lick a leg or whatever because they can taste the salt as well. They love that stuff.
They do.
So you're literally leaking it through your body. And what you want to do is replace that as much as possible. Okay, so if you can get that into consume quite a lot of salt in our diets. But if you've been physically active and you're not eating whilst you're walking, jogging, mountain climbing, playing a sport, generally people aren't eating, it's good to consume a liquid form of electrolytes, which would make a big difference.
Yeah, and there's been a huge move in recent years to all this low salt, low salt, low salt, and people are buying sort of pre-prepared meals. Maybe, I don't know, I'm making this up. Maybe they're not getting the required amount of salts for this kind of climate, for example, that they actually need.
Generally speaking, in modern Western diets, we do get plenty of salt. Generally speaking, processed foods tend to have even more salt because it's a flavor. And because processed foods tend to contain less flavor because they're processed, they have to add salt to add flavor. That's why they're circle and cut down on the amount of sodium within processed foods way higher than it should have been because it just had to have some form of flavor.
Yeah.
And salt can be an appealing flavor for most people. So getting access to salt is not necessarily a limitation unless you're on a very restricted diet. It's just that because we're sweating a lot more than we normally do, particularly in the summer, then our body becomes less or more deficient in it than normal, let's say in cooler temperatures or in wintertime. So that type of deficiency, particularly if you get cramp after exercise, physical activity, things like that, that's when you know potentially that you are either too tight, deficient in sodium, or deficient in two other categories that I'm going to mention now, which are very, very relevant, which is potassium, magnesium, and a little added bonus of calcium. as well.
Right.
So potassium, calcium, and magnesium, those are very interesting ones. One of the big limiting factors is that you can actually get blocked via your medication.
Okay.
So there are certain medications that will block the absorption of those minerals, which can then translate to a side effect being cramping.
Right. So you're getting basically
So if you
malabsorption.
person,
You're
go on,
getting,
sorry.
sorry, you're kind of coming and going a little bit, Marcel, but you're getting this
Ah,
malabsorption sometimes from these minerals from your food because of other medications.
yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So it could be because you're on a certain medication, and those medications would be diuretics, which includes alcohol. So I know that's not a prescribed, but it is a drug. Alcohol, diuretics directly themselves. Some people be on those. Heart medications are
Right,
also an indication or can prevent it. And then steroids as well. There are some people might be on some forms of steroids will also block the absorption of those types of minerals
right.
and then cause cramping.
So you were saying after exercise, but it's not primarily the exercise that's causing the cramping. It's the loss of electrolytes
No.
through the skin during the exercise that is likely or possibly the cause of cramps. Yeah.
Yes, yes. There are cases where it can be the
Oh, Marcel has gone frozen there. You froze. You're freezing for a moment there. You need to pay your internet bill,
aha,
Marcel.
that seems to be a bit ropey. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm fully bars, but and it's the only thing connected to it. Let me just see. Yeah, it's the only thing connected to it. So
Okay, you're back on green again.
okay, great, great. What did you hear last? Tight muscles?
You expect me to think back 30 seconds?
Yes, yes. Dave, help us out. Right, I'll recap. It can be that the person has been the deficiency from sweating or leaking these fluids or medication, but it
Right,
can also be the exercise itself and your muscles are too tight because the cause of it is because, in addition to potentially the other two things we mentioned, the muscles being too tight and then not being stretched regularly. So
right,
when you
okay,
exercise and you don't stretch, your muscles get tighter and shorter and they lose their elasticity as we get older. So if
okay,
you're a person who exercises regularly, whether that's walking or playing a sport or something like that, and you don't stretch, which is the majority I play sports with, the potential for cramping is much, much higher. And it might be later that night, it might be the following day. And that's because the muscle hasn't been able or allowed
mm.
to relax back to its normal state.
Is there an age component to all of this, or is this something that is common really throughout the age groups?
So exercise related cramp is more common in younger people, and general cramp, particularly in the lower limb, particularly at night, is more related to older individuals, less muscle mass, weaker muscles, and are less likely to muscles in their full range of motion.
Right.
And that can cause cramping. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break in just a moment, Marcel. After the break, what are you
No
going to talk
problem.
to us about? We're still following on this theme. What have we got to
We
expect
are.
from you?
I'm going to talk to you about how do we get rid of it, particularly if you have it in the lower limb or any part of the body, really. I'm going to give you a couple of solutions. If you're on camera, you're going to see it. If you're listening, do my descriptive as possible.
Okay, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you, Marcel. Dave, it's over to you.
Brilliant.
Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson. I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol with my regular contributor, Marcel Salazar. Welcome back, Marcel.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And we have it sounds like a kind of dodgy subject, doesn't it? We're going to talk about, well, we are talking about cramps today. And you've been explaining to us, Marcel, that this is not the kind of thing you get after a strong Indian curry, is it?
Well, now, so here we're talking about a different kind of cramp. And if we want to go on to different types of cramps, there are gastro cramps and there are menstrual cramps as well. Now,
Right.
I'm not sure that we're all to go into detail about menstrual cramps. I know we've all been around it, but we haven't necessarily them ourselves. Maybe Dave, but I don't know. So it's not really something that probably we're qualified
No,
to discuss. But
yeah,
the causes of them, obviously, is the preparation of some. But gastral cramps, again, similarly, is fundamentally your abdomen, your gut, reacting negatively, potentially to a curry, potentially to some form of food that you've had, that obviously means that it isn't agreeing with you, or it could be that you've got an allergy. But that is fundamentally also a contraction within the abdominal wall and smooth muscle that's freaking out about whatever it is that you've eaten. It could be also acid, which is slightly different. So yeah.
Right. So, but we aren't really talking about muscular in the sort of limbs, aren't we? That's really what we're focusing on here.
Yes.
That's
much more common.
I have to say that well, the two things. I think I can only ever remember getting cramps in my legs, or, and this still does happen to me from time to time, in my feet. And it's usually
Yes.
when I'm in bed, stretched out, and I don't know, it feels like I turn something the wrong way, and
Yep.
and my foot goes into a kind of cramp spasm. Is
Is that on the underside of your foot?
on the underside? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's related to the calf muscle. So, and
Okay.
that's really common. What you've described is really common, that you'll stretch your toes away from you, and then either your calf will cramp or your underside of your foot will cramp, and then you're like and then you have to move.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But is it the
And the
same cause?
solution.
Is it the same cause though, Marcel?
Yes, it's very well. That's going to be at nighttime. That's going to be related to circulation, because circulation reduces massively at nighttime, of course, and in particular to the periphery. So your feet, your lower legs, and your feet are about as far away from your heart as it's going to get.
Right.
And so that's where the muscle, the blood flow has been reduced. Now, I know that you do a lot of walking.
Mm-hmm.
So the chances are it's not that your muscles are weak. It is more that potentially, probably after the walking, you didn't necessarily stretch the calf muscle out.
I think that's highly likely.
Right. And I think that's highly likely as well, based on what you've told me before. So then imagine you've walked that muscle has been working all day long, contracting, shortening, working, pumping, all that, and then you stop.
Mm.
And instead of winding down that muscle and allowing it to relax and open back out again, it stays like that.
Okay.
And then you go to bed and the circulation reduces, the oil stops pumping around that wonderful engine that is your calf muscle. And then suddenly you switch it on because you stretch or you move and you contract that muscle maximally without even thinking about it. And suddenly it spasms.
Okay.
And that can happen under the foot or in the calf. They're both connected.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and that's what happens.
So we've talked about the causes, and I think most people can relate to what you're talking about. You know, the loss of electrolytes, dehydration, and these other sort of trace elements like potassium and magnesium. Perhaps being low. So what do you do? You're lying in bed at night, and you get this golf ball stuck in the back of your calf.
Yep.
What do you do with it?
So the first thing to do, if you're lying in bed and you feel the golf ball in your calf muscle, is bring your toes upwards towards your knees.
Okay.
So you go the opposite direction of what has caused the contraction, the spasm, the cramp. You bring your toes upwards, right up towards your knees, and push your heels away from you.
Right.
And what that's going to do is it's going to stretch the calf muscle and the muscle muscle called the soleus muscle, and that's going to start the process. But that might not be enough, because when the contraction or the spasm is on, very strong, and it can actually, you may notice that one foot doesn't go as far as the other, back here, and the other one halfway,
Right.
because the muscle is holding on so tight it won't let you flex at the ankle, is called. So then what you want to do is you're going to have to get up and out of the bed, and if you can put your feet firstly flat on the floor first of all, and put some weight on them, and just literally your foot in a natural position with your
Right.
body weight will start to stretch it.
Mm-hmm.
And then to increase the stretch, you put the affected leg behind and drop your heel.
Okay.
So
So
then you're stretching that muscle even more.
yeah, I'm doing that as we're talking, and I can feel it on the back of my calf muscle. Yeah.
That's it. Exactly. If you can all do that whilst we're talking, or if you're watching, that's a great idea. You'll feel that stretch even in a seated position. But if you're
Yeah.
standing, you'll feel more. The other thing you can do, once you've done that and you've held that stretch for about 15 to 20 seconds, you'll probably start to feel it coming down a little bit.
Mm.
Now, there's two things you can do thereafter. You can do it again, but you can also sit down, bring the leg on top of the other if you can, so as if cross-legged,
Mm-hmm.
and try and push that hard ball, literally releasing that ball with your thumbs.
Right.
You can use your hands, if it's too painful, you can use your hands to move up and down the muscle, and that will help to release that muscle and relax that golf ball that's in there.
Mm.
It can be uncomfortable, it can be quite painful. If at the same time as you're doing that, you're going to feel the muscle contracting and relaxing, and that's going to be quite intense, but it will get the blood flowing and it will ease off over time.
Mm.
That if you have access to magnesium spray, this is really
right.
effective
Yeah.
at prevention as well as treatment.
Yeah.
So I have, for example, recommend and sell a magnesium from the Dead Sea, which is an oil, spray it directly on whatever body part is causing you problems.
Mm.
So it could be the bicep, it could be the shoulder, it could be your quad, it could be your calf muscle. And if you're experiencing it at the time, you can put it straight on there. When you are deficient in magnesium, you're literally tingle.
Mm.
Literally tingle. So wherever you put it, you might not feel any tingling, which is fine, but after about 5 minutes, you can also, you'll find that it eases off the cramping as well. So that means you could also put this spray on. If you're prone to cramping, you can put
Right.
the spray on every time before you go to bed.
Yeah, well, you actually recommended that to me when I had
Yeah.
some problems with my knees, and I did use it, and I have to say, you're not aware of it doing anything, but
No,
you are aware, as you say, 5, maybe 10 minutes later, all of a sudden you think, oh, that's eased off. It's feeling a lot better.
fantastic,
Yeah,
fantastic. And that's exactly it. You're not necessarily aware, it's not instantaneous, you're not in the area, but later on you've forgotten about it, and then you're like, oh wow, actually that feels completely relaxed, etc.
sure.
And that's the nature of prevention. And it goes back to the question that you asked me before,
Yeah.
which is, when do people come to me? And it's rarely to prevent a problem. It's
Okay.
more often to deal with the problem that's become apparent right now. I know he's been ignoring for at least 20 years. So I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing with. So, if you can prevent it, that is, if you feel you have a weakness or imbalance in your body, it's better to do something about it preemptively
Mm.
before it even becomes a problem, and then it'll probably be resolved much quicker.
Yeah.
But if you have a problem, then obviously it can be dealt with, but it will probably be a bit more uncomfortable. It might limit your lifestyle. It might stop you from doing certain things, or it could be just really painful.
Yeah.
Which is most commonly the time that people have a call to action. Their call to action most often is a pain response.
Yeah,
Which is,
I have known people to have this kind of cramping, and so usually it's where you describe, I think, in the calf muscle, even when
yeah,
they're out and about on the street, and they're almost falling over with the pain.
yeah, that's right.
but
Yeah,
also, when you live where we do, and you've had already 4 months of temperatures in the 30s and whatever, and then 80% humidity, it's very
yeah,
easy for that to happen, isn't it?
yeah. It is. It is. It's very easy for the. I mean, it's very easy to carry on, and that's the thing. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to just carry on. It's obviously there's a certain amount of British mentality about carry on, all that kind of thing. But it's more common in women to pay attention to bodies,
Yeah,
and then they send the men in. That's generally how it goes.
yeah.
More self-aware than men, and then they may come in for an issue they have, and then it will transpire that their husband has been suffering from back pain for 15 years and hasn't done anything about it,
Right.
and now obviously needs to get something done, and that's fine. But
Mm.
obviously, the sooner you get it looked at, the faster it tends to heal and recover.
Yeah. Can I ask you something about salts, Marcel?
Mm-hmm.
Because Um, my wife has this mania about these sort of processed white salt, the kind of stuff you used to get in the big sort of tubes, and only uses we only use at home the Himalayan sea salt.
Yeah.
And she reckons that it actually contains a lot more of the minerals and ingredients that your body needs than this refined salt does. What is your thought? What are your thoughts about that?
Totally agree. As far as we understand so far, Himalayan salts with the pinkish color
Yeah.
is very, very popular. And as a result of it being very popular, it's important to try and get one that is real.
Okay.
And validating that is quite difficult because if the
Mm,
packaging looks legit, how would you know? But ultimately, if you do get the real deal, you're going to be getting natural in the earth for tens of thousands of years, which is only going to benefit you. Exactly as we mentioned before, table salt
mm.
is refined and processed to contain only what is absolutely necessary, which is the sodium,
The sodium. Yeah.
which is the salt essentially. But there is value, and salt can have nutritional value because of
Mm,
other minerals that come with it, such as with naturally sourced Himalayan salt.
mm.
There are other forms of salt as well, but that is going to be far more nutritious for your body. Table salt, which again is a very highly processed, usually
Yeah.
chemically processed product, which has no other than an enhanced flavoring
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, we've been using we can source good Himalayan salt down here in some of the herbal stores, and what I have noticed is you're obviously getting your sodium and iodine and all these other things that are good for keeping this balance in your body, but it's actually difficult to oversalt things with it.
Yeah,
And it's not as potent, so you can have your salts and
exactly.
things, and you're not sort of screwing your face up when you take your first mouthful of the food because
Well,
it's
so
oversalted.
exactly that you're absolutely right, and that's the thing. Table salt has been manufactured to be as salty as it can possibly be, which
Mm,
means you don't have to use as much. Think of it in exactly the sugar and sweeteners.
right. Okay.
Sweeteners are up to 1,000 times sweeter than sugar, which
Right.
means that you need to use less, but it's much cheaper to produce,
Okay.
and it's all chemically created.
Yeah.
So your body responds to it in the same way as if it is 1,000 times sweeter. So you
Right.
get hormonal responses, you get digestive responses, you get gut responses. So again, this is why sweeteners are not necessarily as beneficial, shall we say,
Mm,
as they are professed to be.
right.
And doing that,
Yeah. So you were talking us through this kind of response, especially if it happens during the night, to
yeah,
cramp, let's just say in the lower limbs.
yeah,
Um, and it really is, well, I'd worked this out pretty much for myself, what you were
yeah,
describing there, that if I pull my foot up towards my face, towards the upper
yes,
part of my body, I didn't register what I was doing was stretching the muscles on the back of my calf, but
yeah,
it certainly is the way to this stretching.
Yeah,
does
it seemed
take it
logical, and that
away.
was right. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What else would you like to say to us about this whole thing, Marcel?
Well, so if you can, so where this is relevant perhaps for another group of people is for people who are and either experience cramp at the time. So let's say you're playing a sport
All right.
and you get a
Okay.
cramp in a given muscle, again, the calf muscle, the hamstring muscle, it could be even your bicep, it could be your quad muscle, the muscle at the front of the thigh. The point of this is to try to release it as quickly as possible by going in the opposite direction that caused the cramp. So for example, some people, if they're lying, let's say on their stomach on the beach, they bend their knee, bringing their heel to their bum, and they suddenly get a cramp in the back of their leg
Right.
or in the hamstring muscle. What you're going to want to straighten your leg as much as possible, probably turn over and stretch
Oh, yeah.
the opposite direction of where the spasm is happening.
Right. Okay. Okay.
You're playing a sport where you're running around a football pitch. People probably have seen this. If you gets a cramp, the first thing they do is start to stretch that person out by either straightening their leg, pushing their toes down towards their face. That type of thing will alleviate cramping that happens. And where we see cramping in sports is after 90 minutes, usually in extra time. And actually, football players are a lot fitter now than they used to be. Back in the day, as you know, the average warm-up was a cigarette and a quick fry-up. So as a result, after 90 minutes, these players are puffing and panting, they're carrying their beer bellies, they're looking for the next pint, but as a result, their muscles are also cramping intensely and they can barely run because of the cramping.
Right.
Nowadays, because of the diet, nutrition, the awareness, the electrolyte replacement throughout the match and at halftime, on through to 120 minutes or more.
Yeah.
So, there's a huge disparity, but that comes down to flexibility, electrolyte replacement, stretching, and the nutrition on board. So this still exists, but if you take better care of yourself and you plan to prevent it, clients who get regular cramping, and if you get regular cramping, definitely something that you can get addressed either by a health professional or it can be an indication of something more severe. Don't ignore cramping or muscle tremors if they are happening on a regular basis.
Right. Okay. Do you
So
think?
what I mean by that is obviously if you are getting cramp every day or a couple of times a day, or if you're limping, then it's going to be important that you get this addressed either by a health professional or by a doctor who can obviously assess whether there's any other issues or conditions going on. Possibly there could be some interaction issues happening there. There are some things you can absolutely do with somebody like me, but if that doesn't resolve it, you need to get this looked at to find out whether there's a blood test necessary or some other form of health-related issue that.
Marcel, do you think that, for those who are listening from warm countries, or at least warm in the summer countries, do you think that perhaps we don't take enough care about what we put into our bodies during these warm months? I mean, I see people having an English breakfast with a glass of beer in some of the cafes. Now I think that's strong. That's good, But
it's a solid effort.
yeah, it's got something to it. I've even seen them having a glass of wine with a fried breakfast as well, which
well, what it does do, I'll tell you what it will do. When I say solid, what I mean by that is that's a solid effort in your fast tracking to solid arteries.
Right.
So, that might not be something that you want to look for necessarily, but having blocked arteries is for your blood pressure, for your heart, for your brain, those types of things. So you're right. But unfortunately, the English breakfast generally is, I think everyone now knows that it is something that should be treated as a treat and had on a rare basis. because there's nothing really too good for you on a regular basis. Every now and then, once
Yeah.
a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. Dave's looking like he wants to cry. It's it's not something that should be considered ideally
Yeah.
part of a regular diet, just because there's too many trans fats, there's too many things in there that aren't nourishing your body, and if they get stuck in your bloodstream, then they'll create blockages, which can lead to all sorts of health-related issues.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I don't mind a sort of English type breakfast from time to time, but it's more in the winter than in the summer. But
Right.
but what I was thinking is that people do, oh, I'm really thirsty, I'll have a beer. Oh,
Yeah.
that was great. I'll have another beer. And
Yeah.
it is to some extent, part of the culture down here. When you're thirsty, you have a beer. And yeah, I know a lot of people carry a bottle of water around with them, but sitting down in a cafe or in a restaurant and having a beer in the summer is kind of normal, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I'll tell you why the beer is quite satisfying. And this is something that I found in myself as well, because I don't mind the odd canyon here and there. I quite like refreshing drink, particularly if I played sport. But what it is, it's not the beer, it's the carbonation. If
Okay,
you have carbonated cold water, it's almost the same. The satisfaction on the tongue is
absolutely.
almost the same. Of course, some people enjoy the alcohol as well, but the feeling is very similar if you just have even a flavored fizzy water or something like that. Again, which is why people enjoy Cokes and Sprite and whatever. That's going to be laced with all sorts of stuff, but it's the carbonation. And if you have carbonated water, even with a little bit of flavoring, whatever, that's way better for you than any beer or any Coke or any Sprite is going to be, than if you were to have one of those. So that's a solution to a potential problem if you find that you're only having beer.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, the agenda is to go out and have beers. And
Yes.
alcohol is one of those things that will contribute to, as a diuretic, that will contribute to calf issues, particularly at night. And it can also lead to other issues that impact on your health relating to crystallization in the lower limb.
Right. But Marcel, you're going to have a job convincing the tourists that come over here and get a pint for €3 that drinking less beer is a good thing.
Correct, correct. That's an uphill struggle that I'm not looking to take those people on. If they want to enjoy a beer, it can't be resisted. It just means that be aware that your chances of getting a little bit of cramp, particularly if you're over the age of 50, is probably higher. If
Yeah.
that, if you're drinking all the time at your age, it's probably some other health issues that are going to come about from it as well.
Yeah.
But obviously
Especially,
enjoy your holiday. That's the most
especially
important.
when you're into day 4 of the holiday, Marcel.
That's right. Day 4 of consistent day 4 of a holiday. That's a pretty serious commitment to it.
Yeah.
So that's a different thing altogether. Yeah, absolutely.
Marcel, we've got just a couple of minutes left, and
Yep.
I thought perhaps you'd like to give out your your details, because you do have a Facebook page where we put these podcasts up, but you also have other stuff about strength training and all sorts of stuff. Do you want to give us some
Yeah,
information about that, Marcel, so that
sure.
people
I'd
can
love
look
to.
you up?
Thank you. Yeah. So I have a number of platforms. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and I also have a YouTube channel as well. The YouTube channel is going to be under development now to provide a lot more informative information going up there. All our previous radio shows as podcasts are up there too. My website, which is very straightforward, is strongforlife.me, meaning me, or you can type in strongforlife.es if you prefer to be Spanish. But you will find more information about me, more information about the services we provide, as well as our prices, and indeed my location here in Calypso, Calahonda, where you can obviously come and visit our facility and obviously receive treatment as well. So numerous platforms whereby you can book in. And I also have an online diary, which a lot of people seem to like, actually. A lot of people like my online booking system. So that exists too.
Indeed. Marcel, our time is almost up. Can I thank you again for joining us? It's always good value having you with us, because we get the subject you choose, but we also get to talk about other stuff. Thank you so much, Marcel. We'll
No
perhaps see you
problem.
in
Thank
about a
you so
month's
much.
time. Another month?
Yes, please. That would be
Okay.
great. I would love that very
Thank,
much.
thank you to everyone who's been listening in today. Thank you to Dave, our producer in France. Have a great weekend, everyone. Keep hydrated and get the salts in you. And we'll join you again next week, Friday, 1 o'clock.